Hi everyone, welcome to Flow Living's Facebook Live chat with me, Alisa Vitti. I'm the founder of Flow Living and the author of Woman Code and the creator of the My Flow app. And I'm really excited to be here with you today because today we're going to talk all about what your period should look like and what kind of, how you should interpret it and what you need to know about it, because it is, in fact, your fifth vital sign. And it's really important to be able to look every month at the color and consistency of your bleed to really help you analyze and evaluate how well you're doing hormonally. It's like a free monthly test that you get to have access to just by virtue of menstruating, and you don't have to do any other fancy lab work to see what's going on. So I want to break down the different colors and the types and really empower you to interpret that for yourself. So a little backstory, just because this is always so fun to share, is that, when my book came out in 2013, Woman Code, I had the incredible, great opportunity to go on the Dr. Oz show. And so one of the things that I felt really passionately about was to share the fact that when I teach, I talk about these different period colors as a way to evaluate your cycle and how you're doing, what you might need to shift with your diet. And so I just realized I forgot my headphones and that the video sound might be not so good. Hold on one second. I'm going to run and get my headset. We're live, people. This is live. Okay, so let me plug that in. Forgetting something. I felt so untethered. Okay, hopefully you can hear this better. Yes? Let me know if the volume is better for you now. So welcome. I'm Alisa, founder of flowliving.com, creator of the My Flow app, and the author of Woman Code. And so I was just sharing a story about the fact that back in 2013, I had this really exciting opportunity to go on the Dr. Oz show. Thank you, Audrey. I'm glad I ran to get the headphones, even though I'm sure that was a little strange. So I put together this segment idea just based on the things that I've been doing when I was teaching in workshops, that, there are these 4 different colors of your period that you can see pretty typically, and this is what it means. And I would use simulated fruit juice. I would simulate the menstrual blood by using fruit juice on little white dishes. And so, when I pitched the segment, it was like, oh no, we can't show menstrual blood, even if it's simulated on national television. That's too much. It's going to be too yucky for people. And then, some people were saying, well, no, it's really, we've talked about poop on TV, like we can talk about periods. And it was really great because when I did finally get on set to do the run through with Dr. Oz, he was like, this is great. Like, let's put more of the juice on the dish. Like, he was so great about it. And I think it's really, so we did that whole segment, and then fast forward to last year, so 2016, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists made this very important, history-making kind of decree that states that for a woman, her 5th vital sign is her period. So just to put that in perspective, so every human has 4 vital signs. Like when you go into, let's say, an emergency room setting, they're checking for, heart rate, breathing rate, temperature, and pulse, right? So if you're a woman now, the 5th vital sign for you to understand how you might be affected in terms of disease, long-term and short-term, is your period. And I think that is such an important conversation for us to have, and to have such an important governing body make a statement so powerful about our periods, to say, hey, you know what? This is something we should all be taking seriously. This is something we should all be doing a monthly accounting of. This is something we need to have an ongoing relationship with, because it's a easy
free biomarker. It gives you instant biofeedback about the status of the ratio between estrogen and progesterone. It can even give you insights into insulin and thyroid hormone just by virtue of understanding how the cycle is affected. So I kind of want to break it down. First, before I dive in, I want to know how many of you are having your period today. If you want to just post a little, yes, I'm having my period, or a little high five, or some way for me to know, or just hearts, let me know how many of you are menstruating. I myself am in my luteal phase, so I'll be looking forward to getting my period towards the end of next week. But I love, if you're actually menstruating, then this is great because you can use this information right away. Okay. So, good. Lots of bleeding women. I love it. I love that you're spending your afternoon bleeding with me. That's really, you can't know. I don't know if all of you know this story about me, but I find that I love sharing it more and more now that I'm so far away from it. But when I was 12 and I was in the very first sex ed class of the series, that started in 6th grade, there was like a couple months where we were doing sex ed, and I was 12, and it was the very first day that we had our sit down with the sex ed teacher, and this was the first time I had ever heard about menstruation. I mean, despite what some of you may think, given that I am the queen of periods, I did not grow up in a house where my mom talked about it or any of my female relatives talked about it. I still haven't had the talk with my mom. She still hasn't had that talk with me. So when I sat down to hear for the first time that I was going to get a period and what that was and all of that, I was truly, I don't know how to describe it. I was in awe. The only thing I can say, I was in awe of the whole shebang. And I just thought, I was literally looking around the room like, did you know about this? Like, I was looking at my friends like, did you know that this was something that was going to happen to you? Like, and, no, I was probably the only one who had such a reaction of like positivity. Most girls, and I'm sure even some of you listening had that experience. You were like, oh, this sounds not good, and it's the monthly curse, and da da da. But for me, I really was so jazzed up about it, and literally we were let out for recess right after that class, and I took my 3 best girlfriends. There were like 4 of us in a little clique, and I took the 3 of them, Kristen, Melissa, and Katie. If you're listening, hello. And we sat next to the building. There was this like wall that we used to climb up and sit on top of this wall, and that was the first meeting of the period club. I was the president, and we had like 2 main activities of the period club. Every day we would meet at recess and have the period club meeting at the start of recess, and it was who thinks they're going to get their period, and we would do like a bathroom run to see if anybody was started to spontaneously have their period. And then we would also I would do, and I didn't realize what I was doing, but I was doing a form of visual diagnosis. I was sort of looking at the effects of sex hormones on our developing bodies and just sort of guessing who was going to start menstruating first. And I remember it was going to be Kristen, then Melissa, then Katie, then me. And that was the order that I intuitively felt based on sort of like our bodies and how we were maturing, who was going to get their period first. And I was 100% right. I just didn't think I was going to be so last in line, so everybody was basically menstruating by the end of junior high as predicted. And I didn't get my period almost until, I was almost 16. So I don't know, is that sophomore year, almost junior year of high school. So I was very late, very last. But yes, I go way back with the love for the periods. And I really don't think it's ever stopped. It kept just popping up in my life, of falling in love with it in different ways. And even the very first time I did a biology segment on the reproductive system, I remember just being taken aback by how it was described in the academic literature, how negatively it was portrayed. That always just stuck with me, as opposed to how, the male reproductive system was being described just with just language, just really interesting. And then, of course, when I myself really didn't menstruate for a full decade, so from 12 to 22, when everybody else is getting their cycles, I maybe had a total of like 6 periods over the course of that decade. I really didn't menstruate very often. And it was something that really was stressful. And then, of course, I had increasingly worsening symptoms over the course of that decade, resulting in finally having a diagnosis that I was able to bring to my gynecologist of polycystic ovarian syndrome. But, for someone who like was in love with a period from like the minute she heard about it to not having a period for 10 years, it's kind of funny how these things work out. So I've just keep getting pulled back in, and I just keep falling back in love. The more I learn about our bodies, the more I just think what a gift it is to be a woman. So all that being said, the Queen of Periods is going to now give you a tour of the different colors of your bleed and what it means and what you need to know so that you can take charge of your hormonal health. Because why is it that I care so much to educate you about these things? It's not because I am like a super nerd about your cycle. It's because I know how totally life-changing it is to get the information that you need to do the self-care that is required to have a healthy cycle restored. And I know the difference in the quality of life before you do that, right? Where you're just continuously suffering and symptoms are getting worse, or they come back every month and they take you out of the game of your life every month, versus after, where you can really leverage the powerful, glorious, cyclical nature that you have, and really take back not just your health to be symptom-free, but also to really tap into your full expression, your full creativity, to really be fully self-actualized. As a person, the foundation of that is your health. And as a woman, the foundation of your health is really the quality of your cycle. So let's dive in. And I'm so glad, Rebecca, that the program has been so life-changing for you. I mean, yeah, that's the whole... I was like, the first client, and I know how life-changing it is. And it's been a privilege to work with thousands of women in so many countries and to really help everyone have access to this information. And I guess I'm just still that girl in 6th grade who wants everyone to be super excited about their period and to know what they need to know about it so that they can be their best self. So let's dive in, okay? You have 4 different, I love seeing, I'm interrupting myself because Virginia just wrote a really cool little story about her experience. Yeah, thank you. I mean, I can say it as much as I want to say it, but really, we as a community of, dare I say, sisters in the flow, are actually together collaboratively changing a whole culture of, disconnection from our bodies as women. And we're also changing and improving the quality of healthcare that we have access to, because it's just not enough to go to get an annual exam once a year when every single month you might be dealing with real things. There needs to be a place for your periods, and Flow Living is that place. And it's just been the joy of my life to create this place, this platform, this service, and to really recognize that we've been not told the whole story, and what we've just not been told is like how our cycles work, and then what we do with food and diet to manipulate that for the better. And it's so easy; you just need to be shown how to do it, and that's what we do anyway. Thank you for all of that. So let's go into the colors, because that's why we're here. And you know how I like to, I don't know, I'm Italian. I tend to talk with my hands and babble on and on about certain things. So we could talk all day. But let's get to the colors. So there are 4 colors, but I really talk about 5 different period types, because one of them is sort of not so color focused. So let's go through the colors first. So the first thing that I like to do, and by the way, in case you're not taking notes, you're just listening and you're on the go, don't worry. There's the V-sign quiz, okay, that I created, which is on we also call it the period type quiz. It's on the homepage at flowliving.com. So every month for free, please go ahead and go through the evaluation tool and see what your period color is telling you and which type you have, because that's what I built it for. There was just no resource for that, and I thought we should have a free tool to help us evaluate what's going on. So the V-sign quiz or the period type tool is available for you for free every day on flowliving.com. So the first type, let's start with the brown type. So that means like the first couple days or the first day of your period will be brown staining, kind of like, you know, prune juice, right? Kind of this sort of brownish, dark brownish kind of color. And you can have that for the first few days, and you can have it for the last day or so of your period. And this just is indicative of one specific thing. This is indicative of low progesterone levels. So, you know, it's important to know that because, for example, let's say you're struggling with severe PMS the 10 days leading up to your period, and then you get this brown staining. Well, that would make sense because without enough progesterone, as we know, you're going to have the worst, you know, PMS phase. The luteal phase is going to feel the most symptomatic because PMS is simply the imbalanced ratio between estrogen and progesterone during that luteal phase. So if you have that brown staining, it will give you sort of the root cause, right? Just seeing your period, that cycle will tell you why, the root cause. Why did you have such mood swings, such bloating, such fatigue, such acne, breast tenderness, all the symptoms that you had? The brown color of your period tells you why, because that brown color indicates that you have low progesterone. This can happen at the beginning of the cycle, the bleed, or at the last few days of the bleed, and it all is indicative of the same low progesterone. So it's really important to evaluate that every month and see what you're doing, because if you have that, then of course you want to make some dietary changes to see how you can eat some foods that are going to boost your production of progesterone, which is pretty easy to do as well. So let's move on to the next color. We're going to go to the red type, which is the healthy, normal, balanced type. So you have like a fresh red color, you know, like the color of healthy blood. Like if you were to get a cut on your hand, you know, that like bright, happy red color, similar to that. You could think of it as a cranberry red or something to that effect. So this is a great color. If it starts and stops, you know, very cleanly with that color, then everything is, you know, very safely within range as far as the right estrogen to progesterone ratio for the cycle. So you're doing good if you see that bright, healthy red color. And then we can move into the third type, which is, I call it the blue type. So, you know, this is like, if you've ever had blood drawn and you're seeing it go right into the vial, you know, it's that darker bluish hue to the blood because it hasn't hit that oxygen. And I'll take some questions at the end. I see all your questions, so I'll get to them. So that darker color, you know, dark purple or whatever you want to kind of envision it, and it also typically comes also with heavy clotting and a heavier bleed in general. This is indicative of excess levels of estrogen. And why? Was estrogen is the hormone that's responsible for building the lining of the uterus, right, during the luteal phase. And so when we have a lot of estrogen, we can have a lot of endometrium building up, and then we can have a heavier bleed. And so this is something to take into serious consideration because, you know, like anything in life, just the right amount is good, and too much excess is usually problematic. And in the case of, you know, estrogen, you know, too much estrogen is problematic in terms of it's overstimulating to certain receptor sites. It can be the cause of weight gain. It can be the cause of mood issues. It can be the cause of, precancerous cells. So we want to take very seriously the fact that we're seeing a heavy bleed. And this is why it's important why I do this kind of a video, because, really, most of us have just been kind of conditioned to say, oh, well, it's my period. It's supposed to be miserable. It's my period. It's supposed to be heavy. Or I'm going to joke about how, I've heard women express things like, oh, they feel like they're bleeding to death, and I'm like, how is that, something that we have allowed ourselves to be talked into thinking is normal or funny or not anything that we should be like immediately thinking about what we should do, what action could we take. And, I think a lot back to my sex ed class when I was 12, and what I learned about the cycle was, compared to what I teach, underwhelming to say the least. It's like, oh, hey, you're going to get a period once a month. You could use tampons or pads. And, when you're ovulating, if you're sexually active, you have to use protection. That was it. That was pretty much it for everybody. That is like nothing. There's no way for you to learn how to interact with your cycle. You're just by nature of what you've been taught, you're immediately put in the passive place, like, oh, this is just happening to me, and it's this whole mysterious, complicated process, and I guess I just have to take what I can get, and there's nothing that I could possibly do to interact in a proactive way, which couldn't be further from the truth. But without that information and education, we just walk around with these like dysfunctional cycles and this dysfunctional relationship with our bodies, and I just can't sit by and let you do that. Just can't do it. So again, check out the tool, and you'll learn as you go through your results. It'll describe, even in a more deeper dive, why you have that happening to you, what foods you should be eating, and it's all free. I just want you to start to feel better. I want you to do the experiment, just even one time, of if I were to change this about my diet, what kind of result would that yield in my endocrine function? Because once you have like a taste of what's possible, I know you won't be able to stop yourself, and you're just going to start to shift your health. So we've covered the brown, low progesterone. We've covered red, which is a healthy balance between estrogen and progesterone. We've covered the dark blue purple type, which is excess estrogen. And we've covered, we've just covered those 4. So I want to cover the last one, which it doesn't really have, that's only 3. So then the 4th one, sorry, I haven't slept through the night in 2.5 years with this breastfeeding gig. It's starting to take a toll on my memory. Anyway, I've got only 2 more months of breastfeeding, and then I'm going to cut it off. So anyway, the 4th type is the light pink type, or just the pink type, where you see kind of a lighter red, light pink bleed. I will comment on period length in a minute. Where you see that kind of light pink bleed, might be very short, and it's indicative of not enough estrogen. And this can come from extreme dieting, and I don't mean like necessarily just calorie restriction, although certainly that is a typical place that a body will go. Think about it this way. Your sex drive, your reproductive capacity, your period, these are not essential for your body's survival. What is essential is that your brain and your heart get access to adequate glucose. So if your diet and your lifestyle is disrupting or making unstable the access by the brain and heart to glucose, it's going to start to shut down other non-essential functions like your sex drive, like your fertility, like your normal cycle. So that's the bad news, but the good news is the more you nourish yourself, the more all of those things will come back online. So similarly with a pink period, it just means you're not nourishing yourself properly. So yes, extreme dieting, calorie restriction, eating disorders is often a cause. Extreme athleticism, where you're like, you see this a lot in teenage girls who they do like 3 sports a season or something, insane, and they're working out or, something to that effect. But you can also experience this if you're trying to lose weight in a very short period of time and you're doing like very intense exercise and you're doing a lot of, cutting out food groups like carbohydrates or fats, as a way to control calories. Or if you're experimenting with like being raw all of a sudden or being vegan all of a sudden or, any number of these types of more intense diets can trigger an ovulation and then, of course, can result in starting to skip periods or have very light periods. And so you want to take action on that. Why? Because low estrogen, you'd think, oh, my period's like super light, super short, that's great. Well, the problem is, just like too much estrogen is not good, not enough estrogen is also a problem, because now we're talking about impacts to cardiovascular well-being and your bone density. So you don't want to be messing with, your heart tissue and your bone structure. These are things that are pretty fundamental to your quality of life. So a light period should trigger you to say, what's up with my estrogen and what can I do to support that? And this would be like one of the only places where I would recommend soy products during the reproductive years if in fact you're having a light bleed. This would be a great food to use short term to kind of boost those estrogen levels. And I'll back up and kind of go through some foods that I like for each of the categories. So then we bring finally to number 5. My brain caught up with where we're at on the list. So the 5th type is what I call the question mark type, or the MIA, missing in action period, which I personally experience. And so this can show up in a variety of ways. So you can skip months at a time. You could skip every other month. You could be late by like a week, or, early by a week, kind of, it's very erratic. And this kind of not on a consistent schedule is indicative of, a breakdown in the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis and the hormones that are involved in regulating the cycle and keeping it sort of moving, keeping the schedule cycling properly. And so that could be indicative of not enough melatonin levels, not enough or too high FSH levels in the case of PCOS or adrenal hyperplasia. It could be the result of elevated cortisol levels that are shutting down ovulation. It could be the result of elevated insulin levels that are also disrupting the cycle. So this is an important one to look at too, because in this case of sort of missing in action periods or questionable timing periods, you really have many hormones along the endocrine system conversation that could be affected, and it's worth really looking at, especially in these situations. What can you do with diet in the case of blood sugar stability? What can you do in the case of lifestyle? Like, do you need to get, like I do, still breastfeeding at night, I need some improved sleep hygiene, right? I need to be sleeping through the night and not being woken up. I mean, I don't know if any mother lives a life where she's not woken up through the night, at least occasionally, but to get that just to occasionally would be a great improvement in my situation. So everyone pray for good weaning for my daughter and myself. But it's important to start to use your period and say, okay, how does this help me evaluate some of the things that have been going down in my life? How can my period help me get real, get honest with my self-care practices or lack thereof, or where I need to maybe turn the volume up with some food support or exercise or sleep to really bring this back on. And that's what I love about your monthly flow, is that it really keeps you honest, right? Because I think sometimes there's like a disconnect where you're like, yeah, I'm a healthy person. I drink green juices sometimes, and I walk, places, and I wear my yoga pants. And you think you're being healthy, and you have like your kale salad, and it all sounds really good. But then when that, let's say, theory hits the road, or when that sort of gets put into the context of how it's affecting your hormones and your cycle, your period isn't going to lie to you. Like, the juice and the salad might not really be cutting it for you, and you're going to see that every month when you're bleeding. So I think it's really important to check every month because it keeps you honest. And, right now for me, the biggest thing I've got to work on is my sleep, getting that to be something that I can actually have. And that'll help me in so many different ways. So what's your period telling you? Now that we've talked through it, certainly you'll kind of quickly know which hormone might be off. But what else is it telling you? Is it telling you that your stress levels are too high because, you're skipping ovulation? And this, of course, all of these things, checking your period goes without saying, evaluating your period, auditing your period every month goes without saying if you're trying to conceive, because it will tell you everything about why you might not be conceiving. But it'll also tell you about, why your sex drive might be on the fritz, or why perimenopausal symptoms after 35 or 40 are starting to increase and feel like you're having too much too young, which is a new phenomenon that's happening that I see a lot of women at just 40 who, feel like they're having symptoms that a woman, at 50 should be having, and that's a real thing. So all this premature hormonal aging is a result of us not knowing how to care for our hormones specifically. I mean, doesn't it just strike you as odd? It did for me. Maybe I'm just the odd duck out here, but isn't it funny that we have all these dietary theories that are centered around, let's say, heart health or insulin sensitivity or muscle gaining, or just all these dietary theories that support one tiny aspect of the body. Didn't it strike you as odd, as it did me, that there isn't a diet of all? I mean, there's how many hundreds of different types of diets, from paleo to the GAPS diet that's focused on gut health. That there isn't a diet that's centered around the cycle. Isn't that strange? Doesn't that strike you as odd that this massive system that affects half of the population doesn't have a dietary theory attached to it? I thought that was really bizarre and struck me as an obvious place where we needed a diet to support it, and one in which, has clear advantages. If you're starting to eat in the cycle syncing way, which is what we advocate at Flow Living, you're eating foods that offset excess estrogen at the moment in the cycle where you have elevated estrogen levels as part of the cycle. That makes so much sense. Why wouldn't you have a green juice full of kale and cilantro during ovulation when you have that surge of estrogen? Why wouldn't you eat cooked leafy greens during the luteal phase, again, when you have a slightly less elevated level of estrogen, but still it's elevated? Why wouldn't you eat certain foods that help you produce more progesterone and help you produce more hormones in general? We don't even know what our hormones are made of most of the time. They're made out of protein. Hormones are made from amino acids. So you got to eat some to make more hormones if you're having issues with your cycle, right? So really, every time I even think about it, it feels like I'm getting slapped in the face. How is it that there isn't a diet that's really organized around this? And so, of course, I'm very happy that I have done that for us. But I'm more interested in having more and more women know that that's a possibility for them and to get them using it. Yeah, right, Deirdre? I know, never thought of that. It felt suspiciously conspicuous to me. So anyway, that being said, certainly use the free tool on flowliving.com, the V-Sign quiz. It's our period typing tool. Use that every month. Get your friends, your daughters, your coworkers. It's a free link. You can just be like, hey, honey, friend, sister, daughter, take this quiz. We send each other these fun quizzes on different magazines about relationships or personality types. Well, you should also know what your period type is. And so you feel this is a fun, easy way for you to share something that you are newly passionate about with your community, because it's not like you're asking them or teaching them something or, getting into something that might make them uncomfortable. You're just giving them a free tool. And I think, God bless the internet. It's the best tool that we have as women to connect with each other and just geometrically, like quantum leap ourselves forward in terms of getting the things that we actually need for ourselves into our hands and into the hands of the people that we love. So let's see, let me check my notes and make sure I covered everything, because I always just ramble on and on about things. Oh yes, right. People have been asking about blood tests. And I love this. So here's the thing about a blood test. Okay, blood test is valuable information, but it only is like a Polaroid snapshot of the moment that you draw the blood out of the body. It's only going to capture the hormone levels that are contained in your bloodstream in that exact moment of extraction. Okay, so can be good depending on what you're testing for. Like that's pretty good for thyroid testing, because your thyroid's sort of producing on a continuously stable basis. So it's a really good way to use a blood test. It's good for things like cholesterol, things like that. But it's not as good to test for things like insulin levels, which we all know. If any of you have friends who are diabetic, or you yourself had gestational diabetes, you have to check it on a pretty continuous basis throughout the day, right? You have to do a little finger prick and sort of check. And similarly with your hormones involved in the cycle, you can imagine they are, they're shifting each week of the cycle. And so to just go and get a blood test, day 2 or the middle of your cycle, you're only going to really get hormone levels that are for that particular phase. And then it's really just a guess as to, well, if she's normal hormonally in this phase, is she hormonally normal in the ensuing phases? So I always think that saliva testing is the best, most superior way for women to really accurately track, how their hormones are doing daily each week of the cycle. And you can order 28-day saliva testing kits, etc. But if you don't want to go through the hassle of that and the expense of that, and there isn't really a pressing reason why you would do that in your mind, the free and easy way for you to check what's going on for sort of holistically with your cycle is to look before you flush at the end of every day of your bleed, right? Just look and see what's the color doing. Now, some of you asked some really really great questions about, what if my period starts off brown and then it gets dark and purpley and clotty and then it turns red and then it goes back to brown? This can happen. I mean, there are these 5 types, but they sometimes can start to overlap depending on how complex of a hormonal imbalance you have. Sometimes you have just sort of like a solitary hormonal issue, like low progesterone levels. But oftentimes when we let these things go for long periods of time without addressing them, and you don't blame yourself. It's not like you're being told from day 1 or even before day 1 of your very first period in your life that this is something you got to look at, and this is something you got to start a relationship with, and you have to like listen to what your body's telling you and respond with food and lifestyle changes in real time every month. You're not getting that message until you met me, so it's very likely that you've had some compounding interest at the bank, right, of things that are starting to go off with the endocrine function and therefore your cycle function. So you very well could have. I mean, I know I did when I first, was dealing with all my period things. Whenever I would get my period in that first decade, it would be like brown, it was so bizarre. And then it would be like light pink and occasionally red. And so, it was indicative of low estrogen levels, low progesterone levels. So all of that being said, the approach truly to healing is the protocol, the flow protocol. The first 3 steps of the flow protocol address the universal underlying disruption to the endocrine system. Your endocrine system is the same, whether you have endometriosis or PCOS or whatnot. You have all the same moving parts. You have a hypothalamus, a pituitary gland, a thyroid, a parathyroid, adrenals, pancreas, liver, you have all of, and the ovaries, and I'm including things that are not typically considered part of the endocrine system, but they work so synergistically with that we have to talk about them. You have this whole concert of organs, and no matter what condition you have, that organ structure is the same, and they all need a specific set of micronutrients to do their job. So the first 3 steps of the protocol really address that getting that core functionality back online, so we talk about stabilizing the blood sugar, because like I said before, nothing can happen, no healing can happen with your endocrine system, with your period, with your fertility, with your perimenopause, with the color of your bleed, with anything, if you don't get your blood sugar balanced. It's so important. The first step of the protocol gets an entire month of work in the monthly flow program, because it's the key to unlocking your hormonal balance. Then the second step, of course, is healing the adrenal cortisol situation, because that really, just that alone can trigger, a stop in ovulation monthly. And then we move into estrogen metabolism, and we tackle that by looking at the liver, and we tackle that by looking at the microbiome and specifically supporting the estrobolome, which is the specific bacteria in the gut that breaks down estrogen. So we tackle it from these both ways. Once you've done these first 3 steps of the protocol, which we call like the triage phase, right? Really healing and sealing all the ways in which you've been disrupting your endocrine function, then you go into cycle syncing. And so no matter what type of bleed color type that you have, brown, pink, blue, red, missing in action, the combination of doing the first 3 steps of the triage and then moving into eating the right foods that help nourish and then also offset the hormones, that ratios that are happening each week of the cycle, just totally normalizes you out, whether it's a too heavy cycle, too much pain leading up to the cycle. Some of you were asking questions about what do I do if my period's like super short, only 2 days? This will help you lengthen the cycle. That a too short period has a lot to do with, just not enough estrogen and progesterone as well. So these things are all something that you can fix. And I've seen it not only in myself. I mean, you got to imagine how eye-opening and academically interesting and also just personally life-changing it is to watch your body, my body, go from not menstruating at all for a decade, really, to then starting at 22, getting my, ovulating and menstruating every single month on time. That was a pretty profound thing, and it was only from doing the protocol. That's it. And I still live cycle syncing, and that's how I maintain. That's how I was able to, keep myself hormonally stable and healthy, so that I could get pregnant at an advanced maternal age. I don't feel old, but that certainly makes a person feel old when you have that kind of phrase, doesn't it? But all of those things are really important. And some of you asked about, how do you support the cycle and healthy hormones after you're breastfeeding? I love that I have like a breastfeeding following of women, because I can't believe I've been breastfeeding for so long. It's been such a joy to do it, and also now I think I'm finally hitting the place where I think I'm ready to move on to the next stage of us being not connected in that way, but connected in new ways. And so anyway, but keeping your hormones balanced while breastfeeding, especially for that long, is a real job, because what's much easier and what's more common that happens is that you forget to take your prenatals, you stop eating right because you're so busy and, you're trying to do your life and be a mom, and, you stop nourishing yourself, and at the same time, you're being drawn upon all those. Breast milk is not just like magical fluid that comes out of your boobs, it's micronutrients and immunoglobulins and other amazing, sugar, and all these things are coming from your body. It's like this, life-giving nectar, and you make that from the foods that you're eating. So if you're not nourishing yourself like a professional athlete, you will very quickly go into hormonal balance, and you can very quickly lose your period for the long term if there's not enough reserve nutritionally for you to, like I said, it's not necessary. It's not germane to your survival having a period. So if you want to have the gift of your period being a part of your cycle, your postpartum breastfeeding years or months or however long you're doing it, you got to eat strategically, and cycle syncing is a great way to do that. And I would say there'd be some other specific other things I would do, like just more of the foods, like more fats and more carbohydrates and more veggies. I would just eat more. So these things are really, really important. And then also some of you are talking about thyroid issues postpartum with breastfeeding. Again, that's a really real phenomenon. Why? It's like a perfect storm. You're not sleeping through the night, so your cortisol and melatonin levels are off. It's going to put, that adrenal strain is going to put some unnecessary overcompensation from the thyroid. It's going to become less efficient. And all of a sudden, you can have that going on. Hashimoto's is slightly different because it's more of an autoimmune issue. But that could be coming through, dietary allergens that you're not aware of, leaky gut, any of the things that are causing any sort of systemic inflammation. So this is what no matter what entry point you're coming at, whether it's, getting your period back after having a baby and you're breastfeeding, or if it's that, you're in your 20s and 30s and your cycle is just really problematic and you want it to be more regular and healthy and not an issue, or if you're over 35 and you're starting to experience a lot of erratic behavior with your cycle, and you don't want to be prematurely aging from a hormonal standpoint so rapidly, the good news is your period color and looking at it every month is a great way for you to relax, first and foremost. Connect with your body, right? Because it's nothing that you have to just you don't have to be disembodied about what's going on with you. You don't have to feel like a victim, right? As soon as you say, okay, the answers are in my blood, and I just have to look, and it'll tell me what's going on. And you can use the period typing tool on the website and get a full evaluation analysis and geek out on all of the stuff that's going on, and say, okay, so this is what it is. This is what I need to do with food and lifestyle. Now I'm going to do it. And within 2 to 3 cycles, sometimes less, you will see that your body balances itself out and your cycle will become that red type, right color, right length, right consistency, symptom-free leading up to it, that you're designed to have, period. So that's really what I want to leave you with today is, you want to be super connected to what's happening with your body. Only you are living inside of your skin, and paying close attention to the signs and signals that your body is using. I mean, these are powerful biofeedback tools that your body is using to communicate with you about the things that it might need. Your period is a huge biofeedback, biomarker. Trust me, if men had periods, I know Gloria Steinem has said that before, but if men had periods, what I would say and how I might modify that statement is that they would be biohacking the heck out of their periods to optimize their performance, their function, their health. They have an expectation that their bodies should perform for them beautifully and optimally. And I want you to walk around thinking that your body should perform beautifully and optimally for you too. It's only a part of our cultural mythology, conditioning, whatever, that teaches us to think the opposite, that we're victims to this, monthly curse and we just have to take what we can get. That is just not true. And you can, beyond taking the quiz, one of the reasons why I built this app is because I wanted you to not just be able to track your color of your period, but any little symptom that you're having throughout the cycle, learn what's causing it and learn what foods to be eating right away, the next meal, to start to counterbalance what you might have been doing that has been throwing your system off, that is creating symptoms for you. So, I just thought if we're going to have a period tracking app, it should be one that helps you have a better period every cycle, and not just have a bunch of data to say that, yeah, every month you're miserable. So definitely, if you haven't downloaded the myflowtracker.com app, you want to do that. Go to myflowtracker.com and download the MyFlow app and start using that. And I think that, you're going to start to experience, the sun is like beaming through my windows here. So you're going to want to start to really interact more and more. Imagine like just how helpful it'll be to check in once a month with the bleed, but if you start to really check in on a daily, weekly basis around your symptoms and take action consistently week over week, the whole quality of your cycle, your health, your access to your creativity, it's all going to just start to really flourish for you. And I'm excited for you to have the experience that I've had, that I've helped so many thousands of women have, which is you learn how it works, how your body works. You learn how to feed it, how to nourish it properly, organized around your biochemistry, your female biochemistry. And then your symptoms go away and your cycle gets better, and you can get pregnant or have a great sex drive or just have an easy period, whatever your goals are. And that's really what it's all about. I want you to have the keys to really restore your own vitality. And that's information that every woman should have. And I'm just such a joy to be able to share it with you. So, I don't know. How long did we go today? Oh my gosh. I'm supposed to only be doing these for like 15 minutes, but I seem to always ramble on for about an hour. I am so touched and thrilled and inspired that you all stay on with me for so long, and it's making me think that there's probably more to do. So I would love to know what kinds of topics and things you'd love for me to talk about on upcoming Facebook Live videos, or if I were to create some other videos, what kinds of things you might want me to talk about. I really do mean that I believe that we are co-creating a different form of healthcare here together at Flow Living, and I do that with you. So let me know what you want, because I want to give it to you, and I'll look for your feedback. And in the meantime, please, again, share the link to the quiz with a friend, share the link to the app with a friend, share the link to the Facebook Live invitation with a friend. So again, do your part to get that good ovary karma. You're one of the lucky. If you're watching this video, you're lucky enough to know about this information and to have access to the life-changing benefits of it. Make sure you share the ovary love with someone that you care about, so that they can have access to this information too, and potentially transform their lives in the way that you are either presently doing or already have done. We're going to get there together as long as we help each other out. So I am sending you all lots of love, lots of good energy to your ovaries. Thank you so much for hanging with me again every Thursday afternoon at 2 o'clock. Download the app, myflowtracker.com. Take the quiz. The link is below in the comment section. It's on the homepage at flowliving.com. And I'll see you next week at 2 o'clock on Thursday. And I'll have something else juicy to talk about with you for a little bit. Until then, take really good care. Lots of love. Ciao for now.